So on behalf of Yellowstone International Film Festival and Bollywood Film Fame Canada, I'd like to thank all of you for joining the Female Filmmakers panel, specifically Breaking the Cinematic Glass Ceiling, Women Filmmakers, that panel, because I think it's so important for us to be telling our stories and telling stories from the lens of a female. But having said that, I want to sort of dive into the concepts behind what a female filmmaker is. I put that in air quotes for a reason. And a little bit about how your identity yourself has informed the way you do things, and specifically the way that you approach filmmaking. I see that we have Aastha who's joined us as well. Hello, Aastha. How are you?
Good. How are
Aastha,
you?
I'm well, thank you. I was just letting everyone know that we'll go around and see if we can cap our answers to each question at about 2 minutes. So we'll get started. All right. So one of the questions I have to start off with is to ask each and every one of you about your identity and how your identity as a woman, if that is how you identify, how has your gender identity, how has it brought forth a different perspective in each one of your respective films that is showing at the Yellowstone International Film Festival? Perhaps we can start with Meha.
Yeah. So the film that's gotten selected for Yellowstone, it's called Unconditional Love. It's a short documentary about adoption of children with special needs in India. So adoption as a concept was something that was close to my heart from a very young age. And while I was going around talking to a lot of people in my family or even during my travels and all of that, I came across a lot of women who from generations, and this is a common thing in India, I'm not very sure how it is in other countries, but women are sort of told that, having a biological child is when your motherly instinct will actually, come up, or, you are responsible to carry forward your lineage and all of that. And for me personally, as far as those things could be true for some women, sure, but for me personally, that's not something I wanted. I've never wanted a biological child. And a lot of people told me that that's something selfish, but I feel like it's a woman's choice, right? So for me, in terms of this film, these are certain things that brought a different perspective while I was going around talking to parents, especially mothers who decided to adopt children. And yeah, so my film sort of tries to break the stigma around adoption as a concept in India. Also, it tries to break a lot of myths that people have about adoption. One of them being that, when you adopt a child, the child doesn't get inheritance, but that's not true. And a lot of people who I spoke to didn't know that. And yeah, so just small things that my film tries to break. Yeah, I think that was my aim with it. And I hope I've tried to bring that forward.
No, that's actually it's such an important concept to discuss, and I can see exactly why being a female would provide a very great lens to discuss something like that. Because as you've said, I think that that's one of the things that we are actually fed. Even though I'm an Indian living outside of India, I don't think that there's been any moment where somebody has not suggested to me that an adopted child is not the same as having your own biological child. So I completely understand the relevance and the importance of discussing something like that. Mehrnoosh, tell me a little bit about your perspective as a filmmaker and how you think that your own narrative has influenced the narrative of your film.
Yeah, I made the America. I mean, you're gonna watch America probably, and it's the story of the Iranian couples who tries United States, and one of them, which is the female one, get the visa, and the man can't get it. I also like try to put two ideas between two women in the film. I mean, they are pretty opinionated, and like one of them try to stay for the country and want to stay home, but the other want to leave. So the guy kind of conflicted between these two ideas. And that's how like the perspective of like me as a woman kind of interfere with the idea of making film, I think. Yeah.
Nice. Asta, for yourself?
Yeah, so my short film is called The Last Rites, and it was actually the idea of the women giving the funeral, like a last goodbye to their loved ones after they've passed away. And a lot of religions, and the one I highlighted specifically was Hinduism, where the woman was not allowed and is still not allowed in a lot of places to give um, fire to the pyre of the deceased. And I think that was something that I wanted to challenge, considering how backward there was a certain part of the society in those matters, and like how um, they had started equating a soul with gender, and a soul, a gender with how much they can love someone that they do. So we challenged that, and we tried to really raise a question of like why women can't do it. And the stories that we had read, because I have personally not grown up in India, I found out that the more the biggest issue was that it's just that women, it's just a tradition that has been going on, and there is no particular reason for it. And a lot of women came out after watching the movie saying that there were many reasons why they weren't allowed to do it, and mostly it was because you're a woman, it's been going on like this for a while now, and you can't do it. And the idea was to spark a conversation, to spark why this is wrong, to talk about it, and actually show the woman doing the funeral rites. So that was the idea behind The Last Ride.
Nice. Again, very important. Talat, I just had started the conversation surrounding how your identity as a female filmmaker specifically brings forth a different perspective in your film. Can you tell me a little bit about that with respect to yours?
Yeah. So my film is basically I don't think Tiffin has a woman perspective as such, because it is based on a religion issue. But if you just deep dive into the nomenclature of how we describe a female as like filmmaker as a woman filmmaker, then you can definitely say that it has a Muslim woman filmmaker perspective. So oftentimes, but I think if men would make the similar film like Tiffin, they might go more into the action where guys were stealing the lunchbox. But my perspective was basically to explore the emotion and the female bonding. So if you see the physical, a little bit physical intimacy, you will see between the friendship, which is very layered. So I mostly stress on the emotion and the vulnerability of a woman. So if I won't force it into having a woman perspective, but it definitely has a religion angle to it. Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, obviously, for the purposes of the conversation we're having today, we're sort of saying female, which is very broad, right?
Yeah,
Gender
exactly.
identity is, I mean, intersectional feminism. We know about all of that, but for the purposes of this conversation, we'll sort of generalize it a little bit to sort of make sure that we're taking into account all different perspectives. What kind of struggles have each one of you faced as a consequence of your gender identity in this industry? I ask this because I tend to find that the industry, although there are some changes, has been primarily male dominated, from the people who are in post-production, and people often refer to them as technicians, which I don't know is the right term necessarily, because they're the cast, right? They're the heart and soul of a film. So in post-production, pre-production, even during filming, in the actual filming process, a lot of the people involved in the crew are male. Do you find that you had additional challenges or struggles making it in the industry as female filmmakers? Perhaps we'll go the other way. We'll start with Talat.
Yeah, so the first challenge is like to prove your ability as a technical person, that you understand frames, that you understand camera, that you know software. So you are just like, you are not so woman about your work. So it's like you are like, basically you need to prove that you are equally men on set. So it's very, this is something which I felt, so while making the film or while being in industry, it's very easy for men to navigate in the crew and like get the better understanding of people and how their work style. But overall, as a woman, you face a lot of restriction to crossing the boundary.
Right.
So it's like when you are dealing with your cinematographer, you have to be really stern that you really know what you are trying to say. So you have to be really stern that you actually know the technicalities of what you are talking about. You actually know the sound design. So it is the kind of the constant proving that happens in the process, that you are equally talented, that you don't need to be a man to be a filmmaker. You can be yourself, be a woman, man, LGBTQ, anything, just to tell a story. That's it. That I feel something.
Aastha, for you?
Well, I've been lucky so far that I haven't really received any hard side of the end of having to prove myself as a filmmaker, and there's been equal respect, whether it was for my own projects or the others. But yes, I mean, there is always this side that I guess, men tend to give you on set, thinking that they know it all, and they have these ego issues if, you're the one who's right. And I have faced that kind of things, when I've been ADing on sets, or I've been, working as a producer, and it just comes along a lot that, if you're leading the set, if you're the one who's leading everything, they have issues, and, they will take it out at you in some way or the other. So I think it's more of just doing what you're doing and doing what you can do best. And I think your work speaks for yourself at the end of it. And so far, that's been the mantra, to kind of keep my mind away from how wrong things go, but to kind of stick, how to do the things the right way. And I think it's also very subjective, like trying not to be a man on set and trying to prove that you are who you are and you're doing your job the right way without having a man intervene, or even another person intervene for that matter. So I think it's the feminism really becomes about you being a woman, and you don't have to kind of be a man to say that you're doing this job in the right manner. It's about being the equal when it comes to all of it. So far it's been good, but I think it's changing, but I think it'll always be there. Especially, I mean, when I faced that with an Indian crew, like just talking to my ADs and just talking to people, I think I think they're kind of getting used to it, but I'm not so sure about Hollywood as such.
Fingers crossed that we keep the momentum going. Mehrnoosh, what about for you?
Yeah, I mean, you never know that, like, how much being female kind of affect, like when you, for example, apply for grants, or like getting the budgets, or like applying for any fellowships, how much it helps you or how much it doesn't help you. So that's a part that I can't answer. But for me, I mean, as myself, like when I was making America, I really didn't face that, because most of my cast and crew, like, we had a very good communication, and we listened to me, and they were mostly my friends, so I didn't face that. But when I came to the US and like made a film here, I kind of faced that here, because I thought that, like, people in set kind of don't listen to you, or like it's like, because there is an imagination that in the US, like, the female's position is kind of better, but it was like opposite for me because I had a problem on the set. So that's kind of interesting.
Mhm. I think, Mehrnoosh, you bring up an interesting point, because although we constantly talk about sort of the westernized world and women being more equal, I find that especially if you're a visible minority and a woman, again, this talks about the intersectionalism of feminism, right? It actually can sort of become even harder sometimes, because people are now questioning even your ability to communicate, not just as a female, but also as a visible minority female. And, you know, of course, and then you put in other factors that inform your general identity, and it can be tough. So I completely understand what you're saying there, Noosh. For you, Meha?
I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, the question was about, right. So mine is quite similar to Astha, actually. I have been lucky enough to work with people who have been very respectful of our individual skill sets and everything. But again, on the other hand, when I've done independent work and I've done all the research by myself and actually go ahead and go and speak to like some government officials. I'll tell you one example. I was trying to interview a government official based in Delhi, and I'm living in Mumbai right now, and Delhi is known to be an unsafe city. So it started, so the official had given me a date to come and interview him, but when I did actually land in Delhi, I was there only for 2 days, thinking, you know, of course, that's the date, and I'll interview him and I'll go back. But when I reached their office, there was just a lot of argument, and they were pretty rude to me, and just, I don't know, it went south when it shouldn't have, and I didn't ever get to interview him. He was just being this very difficult person.
Here's hoping. So we've talked a lot about sort of being female filmmakers, and one of the things I find this very interesting, because in the number of years that I've interviewed people, two things have really come out. One, the constant I find take that we need to have more female stories being told by females. It's very important. But at the same time, I've also found that people will say, we need to stop saying female filmmakers. We're just filmmakers. Stop saying female filmmakers. While the two statements are not inherently contradictory, for me, it would make sense to say you are a female filmmaker, because it's important for me to now recognize that a female filmmaker made this film, which is the reason why the perspective is different. But at the same time, I can understand the dilemma it causes when you're constantly saying that's a filmmaker and that's a female filmmaker, almost suggesting that there is this divergence where a filmmaker is a filmmaker and then there's a female filmmaker. What are your thoughts about these thought processes? Are they, one, do you think they're inherently contradictory, or there's a way around it? And two, how do you feel about each of the statements that have been made? Meha, we'll start with you.
I don't think they're inherently contradictory, but I'll give you my views about each of the statements. So I think the first one about females telling female stories, sure, as important as it is, I feel like that shouldn't restrict men to go ahead and touch upon female stories, because otherwise, if we stick to the first thing, it is a huge restriction on perspectives. Agreed that it's more comfortable for women to tell their stories to another woman, but I feel like, I feel like there are a lot of male filmmakers that I personally know of that could definitely very well, if you go with the process correctly, if you immerse yourself so well, and if you make the other person feel comfortable, I think any person can tell any person's story. So it's definitely not something that I would, advocate per se. The other statement, wherein we should be called filmmakers and not female filmmakers, I think it's okay if we're called female filmmakers, because I think sure it started off like that, and maybe now it's fine because equality is already coming in. But I feel like there's nothing wrong in being called female filmmakers, because as much as equality does exist in some parts of the world, there's still a lot of people who don't get that much credit. For example, I came across so many film festivals which had a separate section for, female filmmakers can submit their films, and that would help. I mean, I could imagine that could help so many females all around the world that can actually go ahead and put their films there and get credit for their films. So I think it's okay, as far as it is still helping women, and it's nothing wrong is happening in that space. So yeah.
Okay. Fair. Mehrnoosh, for you?
Yeah, I'm kind of echoing what Mehta said, that it's really true that like there are lots of films like very good which was made by the male directors, and it's pretty kind of impressive. But I think, for me, is the difference is like the difference between the made of like Battle of Algeria and the Lawrence of Arabia. That one of them like was made by the Europeans, and the other was not made by them. So the difference you would see is that the protagonist of the, like for example, one of them is the white person, but the other is the people of color. So that's exactly the females makes the films, because they have to be be their own voices, and they see some stuffs that like probably some of the male directors are not able to convey or say. That's one point. But also I'm not also agree with like calling like female or male directors, because I think you know you would like put people in a cages when you do that. And I'm kind of agree with like calling them as a director. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Interesting. Asta, for you?
Yeah, I think well, there is nothing wrong in like male directors making female stories, but a lot of times um like writers and directors have been called out for doing it in a very typecast manner. Like, for example, I was reading about Queen's Gambit, and now how he visualized, I'm sorry if I'm spoiling this for anyone, but how he visualized that a woman at her lowest. And that's not necessarily how it is. And, if he had gotten a perspective of a woman at that point in his story, or help him curate that story in a right manner, I think that is very helpful. Um, Personally, I've since I've been producing quite a bit, I've come across, like, I've worked majority with like male directors, and what really comes down to is they'll consult me, they'll ask me, what do you think should be done? They'll ask other women creatives, they'll ask other female creatives, um, female identifying creatives, just to get their point of view on certain amount of things. So I think it's a very murky area. I think it's really subjective to who's making it and how they're making it. I think it comes with a lot of responsibility, because we've always been seeing men as protagonists, and we've always seen women in supporting roles or as the candy of the film, like an eye candy in the film, but we've not seen them as powerful roles. So I think when it comes to representing women in films, it comes with responsibility, and why women have more chances of getting it right is because they have experienced that to a certain extent, whereas men who have just seen it, it's like putting out a men's perspective again out in the world, which has been existing, and that's the certain patriarchy that we keep talking about. And then it just comes back to like, even, yeah, like when you ask about whether it's right or wrong to call a male or a female director, I think it's just how you perceive it. A lot of times getting the tag of a female director is helpful. As an independent filmmaker, it helps you grow, and I have personally experienced that. But I've also experienced that if you're on a bigger platform, when you see 9 out of 10 filmmakers are men and one of them is a female, and she's being recognized for the work she's doing, and that this is a bigger platform. I think a lot of people, a lot of even the festival and the acknowledging committees are not, I think, as open to having a bigger selection of female filmmakers and people who are really trying to put out a story there. So I think it's just really starting off from the scratch. But it can play out to your advantage now. Like a lot of movies have, I mean, a lot of festivals have recognized our films, I believe, just knowing that we have female filmmakers like Yellowstone itself, that, okay, we are trying to make a story, we're trying to say something important, and our voices must be, shared. So I think as long as it's helping everyone grow, I think it's great. It shouldn't just not become a fad that where people are just using that term to kind of get somewhere. So yeah, that's on that.
An interesting perspective. For you, Talat?
Yeah, so I would like to talk about the first statement. You talk about how we should tell more, women should tell more, women should tell more women's stories. So with, I would say it is just a recent revelation to me, because I was reading some books from Manto's, and I started reading, so Manto's story is more about the partition and the atrocities of on women, he talks very brutally honest about how we treat the women during the partition and all. And then recently I was reading a story which was written by a woman and talks about the same atrocity during the partition. Then it's a clear comparison. You can see a male writing the woman's story and the woman writing about their own story. Then you see that women don't romanticize their sadness. They don't romanticize their atrocities. For them, they're just saving their world. For their world means their family, their love. So they don't see the society as a society how a male would see, because they would see as a woman as a minority, and this is the enemy of and a society is the enemy of this woman. And how woman is seen is very different. For her, it's more like saving her family, saving herself, it's more about exploring those vulnerabilities. So I was hugely impressed or maybe motivated after reading it, because I felt that woman has a very, very different perspective. They are coming from I think I've been brought up in a family where we are we are mostly we keep distance from males. We are spending most of our time listening to our aunties, listening to our nanny stories, listening to everyone. So we were surrounded by a woman. We have a very different outbringing. So we have a very different perspective. So when a male, maybe you can counter it with a lot of research and calling your female friends and have their perspective on the screenplay, but still I feel there's a completely different story when it comes to us. We are I strongly support women writing their own stories. And other than this, for the filmmaker, I would say I personally feel that we are beyond our genders. So maybe my life would be I am facing a lot of problems as a woman, or maybe I'm facing a lot of problems because of my religion, or maybe because I'm facing a lot of problems because I'm coming from a different country or a city or anything. But that does not define me who I am. So for me, you can call me a woman filmmaker, you can call me a Muslim filmmaker, you can call me a Bihari filmmaker, Punjabi filmmaker, whatever you want to say. But ultimately, I'm here to tell the story. So it is beyond genders for me. So that's it.
Interesting. Listening to all of you talk, I think that all of you are very passionate about the work that you do and the stories you want to tell. What do each one of you, your films that are at the Yellowstone International Film Festival, what do each one of you want the viewer, the audience that's watching, to take away from each one of your respective films? If you could underline it in one line. Maybe we'll start with Talat first.
So the one thing which I was try to speak out in my film is don't discriminate people on the basis of their gender. Or don't discriminate people on the basis of religion. So it's very important, especially kids' perspective. It's very important what we are teaching our kids and what they are actually following. So ultimately, I just want to stress on that part only. Yeah.
Right, because often we passively are passing on our own inherent biases and prejudices from very early age. We don't realize
it may be just a WhatsApp forward. I'm like I'm making my child see the WhatsApp forward, and he's like, okay, this is how this community is treating this community. Then this community is bad. I won't make any friends from this community. This because this community is bad. So how we are actually like bringing them up.
Right.
So this was the major thing. Yeah.
Nice. Aastha, for you?
Yeah, it's actually multifold. I think because it's a female dominant film, it talks about women's rights and everything. But I think the bigger message here is not for the women; it's for the men in the society, for them to really recognize that something is wrong and that something needs to be fixed. And that I think a lot of countries have adapted to the fact of women's rights and really tapping into the matriarchy of things in a society. Kids are growing up with working parents, and women are treated equally in the family and everything. But when it comes down to these things, which happen once in a while, now if someone's passing away, it's more like you really go back into what our traditional values are. And it's great to have your tradition, it's great to have your values, but I think there's a very thin line between deciding whether or not someone should be able to honor someone they love, or they should follow what the society is saying. And I think this is where the thin line, falls really, because it shouldn't be for your religion, it shouldn't be for your gender, it shouldn't be for anything. It should be what is a personal relationship. I think it's exploring personal relationships here, and that and the other thing is that if with time things change, traditions change, that's how generations grow, that's how we are growing as a society. And if you're stuck with a very stagnant point of view, I think you're depriving the society of growth. So the message through Last Rites is that there should be equal opportunities for growth, not just for men or women, but like for a school of thought, that there should be an opportunity for people to step out of what has been said. And log kya kahenge, that's a very typical Indian desi thing that we come with, that what will people say. I think it's just stepping beyond that and seeing and recognizing human emotions and relationships. So that's something I want to leave the audience with the film.
Nice. Mehrnoosh, for you?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to show the difficulties that Middle Easterners kind of face in terms of life, I mean, men and women. And that's what another things that I wanted to mention, that like when, female can tell the story of anything, like it doesn't have to be just the female's story. So
Right.
that's why I was kind of like telling that they can tell us. So what I want to get from the film is exactly this, like the difficulties that Middle Easterners and like other parts of the world face during the like this time. So that's
Meha, for you?
Yeah. So my film is adoption of children with special needs. So it tries to break the stigma stigma around both these individually. It tries to break the stigma around adoption as a concept, and also as I don't know how it works where you are, but with children with special needs are also, again, there's a huge stigma attached to that when they're considered not to be part of this, not a part of the society. They're considered different. So yeah, it tries to break the stigma around these two topics individually, and also tries to explain a lot of misunderstandings that people have regarding the adoption process. So yeah, I talked to a lot of stakeholders, and yeah, it's a very simplified explanation of these two topics.
Of course.
Yeah.
Meha, Mehrnoosh, Aastha, Talat, I would like to wholeheartedly thank you. I know that for Mehrnoosh, similar to me, it's very early in the morning. And all of you, of course, taking out time to speak to me, speak to Yellowstone International Film Festival, submitting work that is hoping to change some narratives, some thought processes is so important. And I'll be the first one to say that I do think that we need more females telling stories, not necessarily female stories, but we need more females telling stories, because what a viewpoint we have as people who are not the minorities in terms of percentage of the population that we take up, but certainly the minority when it comes to voices in the system that is patriarchal in nature, in a system where when you look up, every high position, it seems to be in politics or otherwise, has been taken over by mostly male. So it's so important for us to try to lend our voices to, and our perspectives, to be honest, through our films and to our audiences, and hopefully making a bit of a difference or changing the narrative or the thought process in relation to subjects. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you for your time. On behalf of Yellowstone International Film Festival and Bollywood Film Fame Canada, thank you. All the very best with your journeys as filmmakers. And I hope to see you and see all of your projects and what you're doing, and continue on a very important discussion that all of you are starting and continuing on. So thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
Thank you
you.
so much to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Take care.
Right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.